Mostly the village has an agreeable uniformity, as with the doors of all the smaller houses, which are painted maroon. At the opposite end of the county, in the valley of the River Avon, stands Bremer House. It too has an association with D-Day. The American 7th Corps under General Woodrow was stationed here, and Woodrow was involved in planning the landings. A few weeks after D-Day, General George Patton arrived and waited for the beachhead to be established before he took his command in France. For a time, the house and nearby village were taken over by the American military, and it's an association that is commemorated today. Bremer House itself has a fine Elizabethan exterior. It was built by Queen Elizabeth's treasurer, William Doddington, in 1583. Bremer village lies 3 miles north of Fordingbridge, close to the Wiltshire border. The old village itself fringes an area known as the Marsh, used for centuries by tenants of the estate for grazing their animals. It's said that Henry II plotted the murder of Thomas Becket whilst riding across the marsh, but this is probably no more than local legend. The Saxon origins of the village are reflected in the church of St Mary's, which dates back to around 980, taking it to within the reign of King Ethelred and Canute. St Mary's Church is perhaps the finest Saxon building in the country. The river meanders south, coming close to the hamlets of Upper and Lower Burgate. It was at Upper Burgate that the artist Augustus John spent the later years of his life. In this part of Hampshire, the Avon divides the chalk downs that run into Wiltshire from the sands and clay of the New Forest. Fordingbridge, as its name suggests, has for centuries been the bridging point into the forest from the northwest, its centre entirely restricted to the west bank of the river. In the 18th century, the town suffered a disastrous fire. In consequence, most of its architecture dates from the 19th century. Once across the Avon, development is minimal, and the character of the ancient forest makes itself felt. There are many small hamlets like God's Hill, where commoners' animals graze freely. Sheep, the traditional creators of heath and downland, are uncommon in the forest and may be found only in this area. It's to country shows that local people come to compete and display their livestock. This is Fordingbridge Show. Since the advent of the motor car, people may more easily attend, but the traditional mix of marketplace and fair hasn't changed radically since medieval times. South of Fordingbridge, there are very few villages on the western bank of the Avon. However, the delightful village of Harbridge is the exception. The tower of the old church wasn't built until 1838, but is now the focal point from the water meadows that run along the river. During the winter months, the river often floods. In days gone by, this was essential to provide for the lush summer pastures. But today, excessive flooding is more likely to indicate burst riverbanks or drainage sluices working beyond their capacity. The road from Harbridge crosses the river at Ibsley Bridge. Built in the 18th century, it doesn't have the splendour of medieval Fordingbridge, but is nonetheless pleasing to the eye. Summertime now, the flood's forgotten, and Ibsley seems the most idyllic of village settings. Various small villages like Ibsley and North Gawley grace the western border of the New Forest. Summerley House in late summer provides the setting for Ellingham Show. Horse shows are held across the county during the season, and scarcely a week will pass without a competition. The Avon flows lazily on past the town of Ringwood, or Rimmock Woodeth, as it was once known, meaning boundary wood, in respect of its position to the forest. Lying on the eastern bank of the Avon, it's been the main market town here for centuries. The Avon is regarded as one of the finest coarse fishing rivers in the world, and there's little to hinder an angler along its banks as it gracefully flows past Christchurch Priory to arrive finally at the harbour. Just as for centuries the Avon has flowed under Christchurch's old stone bridge, so to the east the Lymington River has flowed under Boulder's Bridge, about which little is known, although it is the finest bridge within the forest boundary. In the Domesday Book, Boulder is called Boulder Ford, which means passage of cattle over the forest river. The isolated church of St John has a close association with HMS Hood, which was sunk by the Bismarck during the Second World War. When William Gilpin arrived as vicar in 1777, he was appalled by the dishonesty of the villagers. The village is somewhat more genteel now. From deep in the New Forest, various streams converge to form the Lymington River, which flows just north of Brockenhurst. Brockenhurst is an ancient village in the heart of the New Forest. In Domesday, it's recorded under the name of Brokest. The Norman kings had a hunting lodge close by. King William Rufus was killed in the forest in mysterious circumstances, and it's thought that on previous visits he may have made use of the local village smithy. St Nicholas at Brockenhurst is thought to be the oldest church in the forest. The yew tree here is probably more than 1,000 years old. The church has a Norman nave, although the brick tower that supports the spire wasn't built until 1761. Various forest streams drain into the Lymington River as it runs south to Lymington Harbour. There's been a port at Lymington since Saxon times. Historically, it's been an important boat-building centre, a tradition that still continues, although now on a smaller scale. Today, however, is Carnival Day. Throughout the summer, towns and villages all over Hampshire will perform their own celebrations, and each will have its own local flavour. Six miles to the east is the mouth of the Beaulieu River, one of the most picturesque entrances to any river along the south coast. A couple of miles up the river on the west bank is Buckler's Hard. As part of the Beaulieu estate, it's one of the most perfect examples of an 18th century estate village to be found in England. There was a working shipyard here until 1822, and it provided more than 50 fighting ships for the Navy around Nelson's time. The width of the main street was principally for turning the mighty English oaks that were brought here during this busy boat-building period. But the street itself is also an ideal place to hold a summer festival. Traditionally, estate rents were collected once a year, and to ensure that all would be present in the same place at the same time, a fair was held. People would come from miles around to trade goods and have a good day out. A good time, in fact, would be had by all, even those who are parting with their rent money. Just across the river from Buckler's Hard lies the Exbury estate. In the 1920s and 30s, Lionel de Rothschild established a collection of rhododendrons here amongst already mature trees, and it's been recognised as one of the finest collections of its kind in the world. All of the cottages in nearby Exbury village were built for estate workers. The earliest ones were constructed using a distinctive local brick baked in kilns on the estate itself. The church of St. Catherine dates back only to the early 19th century, built from stones taken from an earlier monastic chapel that stood at Lower Exbury. The river is navigable as far as Bewley, which is a village now popular with tourists. It remains a delightful place, where feeding the ducks can sometimes mean running the gauntlet with the local donkeys. The village is part of the Bewley estate and has been in the hands of the Montague family since Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. It was originally part of the Cistercian Abbey, founded here by King John in 1204. Away from the bustle of summer, winter holds a more subtle beauty over the village. Not far south of Winchester, the River Itchen flows through its water meadows, close to the village of Twyford. In 1876, Alfred Waterhouse demolished the local 12th century church and built the larger church of St. Mary's. Legend has it that one William Davis, whilst returning home on horseback, was caught in a mist, but saved from tumbling into the local chalk pit by the sound of church bells. In his will, Davis left a guinea to the bell ringers, providing they would remember to ring the bells each year on the 7th day of October, and the custom is still marked by the bell ringers' feast. Twyford village itself is full of history. Benjamin Franklin wrote part of his memoirs while staying as a guest of Bishop Shipley at Twyford House. The poet Alexandra Pope went to school here, and Thomas Hughes may have used Twyford School as a model for his Tom Brown school days. The river is accompanied by the Itchen navigation, an addition instigated by the Norman Bishop de Lucy to promote trade. Summer brings with it a special quality to these clear-flowing waters. The source of the Itchen is but a few miles to the east. Flowing as it does from the ancient chalk, it embarks on one of the most picturesque journeys that it's possible to take through an English countryside. By the time the river reaches Cheriton, it has divided and is here disciplined to channels as it passes through the village. Cheriton lies in an area of outstanding natural beauty. Despite some newer buildings, there are cottages that date back to the 16th century. In 1644, not far from Cheriton, is the site of a fierce battle between the Roundheads and the Cavaliers, involving some 20,000 troops. The Royalist cavalry made an ill-fated attack on the Parliamentarians led by Sir William Waller, whose men won a decisive victory. The local lane here was said to have run red with blood, and the event marked a turning point in the Civil War. several mounds are thought to mark the burial places of the many who died. On top of a very different mound is the church of St Michael and All Angels, built by Henry de Blois, Bishop of Winchester. The church stands on the site of a prehistoric long barrow.